Welcome back, everybody, to me talking about something related to books. And today, before we start like our next big on talk about maybe something Malazan related, I still haven't decided what to talk about tomorrow. It might be Night of Knives, it might be Dance's Lament, it might be Shadow of the Torturer, or The Eye of the World. I don't know. You still got wishes? Let me know in the comments. But today I want to talk about something that I thought about for a while, and that is a specific aspect of fantasy literature, maybe also science fiction, and some others. What is generally called genre fiction in like a derogatory way. Why I think it has to offer something that a lot of other, like what you might call literary fiction, or realistic literary fiction, or whatever, does not necessarily have to offer, and why that is actually important. So we're going to do that. And before we do that, I want to dedicate this beer to one of my Patreon backers, my newest one actually, and I'm gonna do some more of those shout outs in the near future. I'm just like really slow with that. I'm sorry about that. But this one goes out to my good buddy Niffelrock. Cheers, my friend. Cheers. All right. What am I talking about today? Today I want to talk about an aspect of fantasy that may be seen as a weakness by some people, but I think it's actually a strength. And that is the ability to state emotions and emotional scenes in a boldness that other parts of literature, like other genres of literature, have left behind for a long time. And I feel that is an advantage in today's world. So my my general argument is the following. And I'll try to walk you through that, and then we'll leave it for today. Fantasy books tend to have scenes in there that, because they are fantastic, are a bit over the top. Like things are oftentimes written very boldly when they have to, very extreme scenes. We have the full palette of things that we can put into dramatize stuff. We can pull out dragons if we need to. We can pull out like lots of dragons if we need to. We can pull out princesses, fairy tale creatures, the whole 9 yards. And that allows us to state a few things boldly that haven't been stated boldly in a long time. When we look back at our world and the world of literature for a long time, apart from some outliers that have always been there, a trend has been to hold back our emotions. We've come to a place, to a time in our world, where being emotional is seen as weak. There's lots of reasons for that. Why we have come to that place, and I'm not going to elaborate those, but generally these kind of things change from time to time, and I feel that like being emotional or being open about emotions is something that is on its way back, and fantasy might be ahead of the curve there. But the fact remains that when you read literary fiction, for example, you read your Jonathan Franzen's, your more like non-genre, like non-science fiction, non-fantasy parts of, say, Michael Chabon or whatever, that classical, like the typical American short story of the 20th century. A lot of that stuff is very much about about understatement of emotions. There's a lot of like negative emotions there, and I've been one of the people that has made a lot of fun of the fact that it's all about like terrible social circumstances, everyone being unhappy, either social, domestic abuse or like divorce, and people dealing with that. But it's oftentimes very understated when it comes to emotions, especially positive emotions. Negative ones, not that much, but positive ones definitely. And once again, this is something that we see in our real world at the same time. People that have been, that we have perceived as leaders in our world have oftentimes been, for a long time, people that seem to be fully in control of their emotions, that are rather wooden, rather, understated in a lot of ways. That's something that has been, I would say, a trend of the 20th century in a lot of ways. Now, maybe, or the latter half of the 20th century in a lot of ways. Now, that may be that this is, for example, a result or like a reaction to the excesses of the early parts, especially the 1930s and so forth, where we have been, in our real world, we have seen some quite over emotional politicians, to put it mildly, and we have put an emphasis, in a way, on emotional themes in, like, things like, especially fascism, but also parts in, like, the presentation of capitalism, of communism at the time. So our, like, reaction to that has been, I feel, for a long time, to look askance at emotions, or at people making a call to emotions, to feelings, when it comes to political decisions and other stuff. And that has obviously bled into literature. It's like we we have become rather skeptical or critical of people that are overtly romantic, I mean, in the broadest possible sense, as in, say, the era of the Romantics in the 19th century, that appeal to the soul, to the irrational, in a way, which is in part at the core of fascism in, like, both Italy and Germany and the 1930s. So there is good reasons to move away from that, and on, like, a global scale, I feel, and look more onto, like, a calmer, quieter, understated way to portray emotions and deal with emotions. But the problem with that is that it has gone rather far, and led to the point that we have, like, now we have been, like, again, generation or two generations later now. We are 2 generations later now, and the media that people consume now, or the people that consume media now, are not the people that still remember, in a non-history class way, the excesses of emotions or the excesses of irrationality that we've seen in the early 20th century. And once again, this goes all over the place. It's not just like German and Italian fascism. It's all kinds of nationalism. It's all kinds of, like, attempts of going towards irrationality. The whole, like, bloom of the occult in England at the end of the Victorian age. The whole, like, all of that, it has been part of it. You look at, your French surrealism. All of that is a way to move. Was an attempt to break away from rationality. So once we've seen the great disaster that led us into, it was natural to turn away from that. But the problem is that we have reached a point where, like, excellence, or, like, high quality in the portrayal of interpersonal relationships, of interpersonal emotions, as seen or judged by what you may call critics in, like, media and whatnot, like people that have a reputation for actually being able to criticize and judge literature and other forms of art, have are championing that understated portrayal of emotions, whereas the what you might call the popular culture, the popular mainstream, whether it's romantic comedies, for which I have, like, very little respect in general, but there's reasons for that, that are apart from, like, the overt portrayal of emotions, or, your very bold strokes painting of emotions, or anything else, or morals, actually, if you want that as well, in, say, your Marvel superhero movies, or fantasy, which is where I want to go with this, is seen as cheap, as crass, and so forth. Now, why do I think that's a problem? Why do I think that we can learn something from fantasy that we have maybe lost in real life? That's sort of where I want to end this argument for today, which I guess will be a rather short one. So, my idea, my theory or thesis is the following, hypothesis is the following. We learn from media. When we grow up, we learn from media. We take what we see there, we identify with it in parts, we idolize parts of it, and we make that part of our personal patterns, of our personal expressions. That's just like how it works. That goes, obviously also for stuff that we see in real life. But media has a huge impact on that, and it has become like, has had a growing impact through, say, the ages of mass media, growing literacy, multimedia, TV, radio, what have you. So so building up that divide between what you may call bold depictions of morality, almost black and white, in a lot of ways. And I'm not going to go too deeply into the morality part of this today, but I can't like completely leave it out. But I want to look at the emotions mostly, and having for a long time an in emphasis on realism and an understated portrayal of all kinds of emotions has led to a situation where, combined with other factors like, and general emphasis on rationality and mostly rationality, and other facts that are part of what we might call our current neoliberal capitalist society, has come to the point where we have learned, or where we think, or we have been conditioned to hold our emotions back in real life as well. We don't go all out emotional. We are very careful when it comes to sharing how we feel towards other people, how we feel towards other creatures, the planet, whatever. We have become very, very careful with stating those emotions because those things are seen as either crass and, yes, are seen as crass, as a loss of control, as unpredictability, and those are all things that may have hard impacts on our future life, on our job situation, on all kinds of other things. The idea of irrationality as being something undesirable has been drilled into us in a lot of ways. And fantasy literature, because of its artistic license, of the way it is constructed in a lot of ways, the tropes that we have in it, the structures that it has, the even more importantly, the way it is clearly fantastic. It is clearly not, it doesn't strive for absolute realism is the wrong word here, but well, it strives for realism, which doesn't exist, but for verisimilitude with the real world as hard as possible. It doesn't do that, which gives it freedom to express emotions in a much larger way, in a much more open way, in a much more direct way, which is something that, for example, especially later books of the Malazan Book of the Fallen are very direct about that. But that's not like the Malazan Book of the Fallen. It's not the only series that does that. But I just felt that, like, especially towards the end of the series, in say Dust of Dreams, there's a scene when a child is born, and the things around that are highly emotional on a level that you will never find in what you might call a, for example, a short story, a current short story contemporary writer of literary fiction, because you could never get away with that level of emotionality. It's just not allowed in a way. But the problem is, if we don't read things like that as well, if we don't consume media like that, we as people are in danger of forgetting that showing our emotions, that having or accepting our irrational, our intuitive side, that we are in danger to forget all of that, and that will severely stunt our growth as people. Now, I'm not saying be irrational all the time, be over the top emotional. That's not what I'm trying to say here. I'm just saying that it is vital for us as human beings to accept the fact that we are not just a rational person that is always in control, that has to be always in control, or there will be, like, outside sanction for being irrational. And books, books in genre fiction, whether it is romance, whether it is fantasy fiction, whether it is horror, by being so clearly uh, different from our worldly reality, give us a chance to learn, or at least stay in contact with that more irrational side, with that more emotional side, and ideally we'll take away some of that into our daily lives and be better people because we allow ourselves to actually have emotions, to actually share those emotions. And as I said before, I feel that this may just be something that is coming back with social media, with younger generations on social media, being much more open about emotions in a way that we haven't seen in a while. And I'm grateful for that. And as I said, I feel fantasy has been ahead of the curve there for a while. So, yeah, next time you talk, think about what fantasy can do that other like genres of fiction can't do. Maybe think about that one and think about how maybe that's a loss for serious literary fiction or other subgenres that don't allow themselves to actually be emotional. Anyway, that's it for today. I'll be back tomorrow with talking about a book, and I don't know which one yet. And I'll see you tomorrow. Until then, cheers.